were you always interested in your Filipino identity?
Yeah. So I'm part of a first gen, like a big group of Filipino Canadians, and I would say North American Filipinos who have migrant parents. And so our exposure to our own roots is through our parents. So the food that we ate was Filipino food. What they would tell us about, stories about the Philippines. That's all we knew about our culture. And anytime we went to a Filipino festival, because in Canada, Filipinos get together for Philippine Independence Day at huge picnics, and we would watch cultural dances. And that is really our only exposure to our culture. And for me in particular, and I know a lot of first generation Filipinos were like me, we want to learn about our culture because we grew up around, well, Canadians, like white people, some black people, but we grew up different. Howie, I was the only Filipino in my class for many years, and one of three Filipinos in my entire school. So, of course, I grew up feeling different, and I felt at home every time I was at a family party or around Filipinos at these festivals. So, I think because of that environment, I already was in sort of like a need to learn about my identity. And this is why Filipino Canadians are very like first generation Filipinos or even second generation Filipinos. We're proud to be Pinoy because that's like it makes us unique. And so I believe that is why I've gone on this quest to, search about what it means to be Filipino, which ultimately led me to do the YouTube content.
Well, that's great. No, so we've all benefited from that search of your identity. But I want to ask you, Filipinos in general are more familiar with the American experience, right? But you had a Canadian experience. I know many Filipinos have migrated to Canada, but it's a different country. You mentioned that you were one of only three Filipinos in your class or your school, and but were there a lot of people of color? Or was it mostly white?
In my school, it was mainly Europeans. So a lot of Italians. Like I had to take Italian class in school. A lot of Italians, a lot of Canadians, some Black, some Middle Eastern, a big mix, but mostly Caucasians, like visible Caucasians. In my time, now it's more diverse.
I think you've mentioned in a past interview, that you never encountered racism in Canada. I'm sure it's far from a perfect society, but it's interesting that you would say, being like the only Filipino in so many situations, that you've never encountered racism. So is that correct?
Yeah, strangely, I didn't. I think it's also because I was born there and I assimilated quickly. Perhaps people who migrate to Canada and are still very obviously migrants, maybe their experience might be different. But living in Canada, I did not experience racism at all. I don't feel like my visible Filipino-ness kept me from, climbing the corporate ladder or being promoted at work or being hired. I never felt being Filipino was a crutch in Canada.